This is Charlie Mato-Toyela again, bringing you another how to make and how to play the flute videos. I just wanted to bring you a little bit more information today about how most of the 5-hole and 6-hole flutes play. This is one of my favorite 5-hole flutes that I've made. It's made out of 2,000-year-old cedar wood from Washington. It's got a nice little twist up here at the top that I thought was kind of neat, and it reminds me of fire, which is really one of my things. We'll get to discussing that a little bit later on. So I use fire to harden the flute so that it sounds nice. But in either case, I wanted to show you today about the 5 holes and how they play. If you notice the length of the flute, almost always there's a hole in the bottom. If not, it's in the back or on the top. That releases the sound vibrations out from having the flute with all fingers covered. The air would have to escape somewhere, so it escapes out the end, and that's the lowest note. And then when you release your finger off of one of these holes, it shortens the flute. In essence, if I were to take a saw and cut it off right there, it would make pretty much the same sound as it does when I just let my finger off of that hole and let the air escape from it. So if you'll notice, the sound will get higher in pitch. And then we can do the same thing all the way up the scale and achieve the highest note that it can produce. And some flutes, especially the 5-hole flutes, have the potential to pull up another higher note than that, but we'll get to that in just a moment. But I want to first show you a little bit about the fingering, and then later on we'll get into some fingering techniques and some different styles. I know for a lot of you that's probably oversimplified. Hopefully you figured that part out already. But like I said, today we're going to discuss a little bit of what makes the flute sound like it does. And of course, a lot of it's, once again, very simple, basic stuff. We'll get into more detailed information and more detailed playing steps and making steps later on in upcoming videos. And of course, as always, if you have a video that you'd like to see me make, or me to give more information on, please feel free to request it. We'd appreciate that. And so in either case, this flute is about 1 inch in diameter, and you know, the length of the flute does make a lot of determination about the tone of the flute, but the diameter has a lot to do with it as well. When you cover all the fingers up and the flute plays with an open end on the end of it, that is the lowest note that it's going to produce. And of course, when you have the fingers all uncovered, that should be the natural octave of that lowest note. And likewise, on many of the flutes that do play the higher octave that you can get, when you uncover these holes right here and have the bottom hole off, the octave of that flute tone usually is going to be kind of a jump key, a jump octave of this up here. It's almost like playing a grace note. You play a little bit faster, and definitely it's very important to know which fingerings to use, but in this one's case, I cover up these bottom two and this one. So just to give you an example, and that top note's a little bit flat, but that's okay. It does make for a really beautiful sound. So just to play the scale all the way through. And we'll get into some other flutes here in just a second as well to let you see the difference between the tones and the qualities of different types of sound of different woods, and also of the range of the flute itself as well. So just keep watching, and okay, and this flute is a higher range flute. It's a style of flute we call the Cherokee Flute. The reason we call it a Cherokee Flute is because the Cherokee Flute that I copied to make this flute was, I guess, around the 90 or 100 year range. It's one that had been around for a while. It was a 5-hole flute, just like this one and like the last one I showed you. This one, however, is made out of an indigenous species of river cane. Unlike bamboo, this indigenous river cane has a link right here, and the other link would be somewhere down, I don't know, it's probably about 2 feet on average distance between the links on this particular species. But it makes a beautiful sound and is excellent for making flutes, because all you have to do is make one cut, and then you have a mouthpiece, you have the flute, and you have another mouthpiece down at the end, which is really great for making flutes. And it's also nice and round compared to bamboos and other types of reeds. But once again, a 5-hole flute, and also, plays the top grace note. And we'll go ahead and let you see what it sounds like and get kind of an idea. But the playing system is still the same. You cover all the holes up for the lowest note and uncover them each one at a time, leaving the previous hole uncovered until you get all the way to the top. And then typically you go ahead and stop right there and cover them back up one at a time, going down just like that until you cover them all back up. Some flutes, of course, have a grace note that you can play. And this is a flute that my son River made. His flute making skills have gotten pretty good these days, and it's one of the prettiest ones that he ever made, in my opinion. It was really nice, so I like it quite a bit myself and kind of latched onto it. I think my wife's probably set it aside for me at this point. But anyway, I'll let you see a little bit of the stylistic things you can do with a higher tone, higher range flute like this one. And that brings me to another good point, that not all flutes have the capability to play that top note, and some of them, when you do find that they play the top note, you may have to find an alternate fingering to play it. So let's see if we can find another way to play this one. So this one, even though I can cover it on these second from the bottom and third from the bottom holes and make the higher note, if I cover this second from the top hole or the next one in line and below, it actually makes a clearer version of it. So let's try it one more time. So that's a really good sounding flute, and I love it. And definitely with anything, when it comes to playing those top notes or any other out of the ordinary fingerings, go ahead and try it, learn, and then try it again, and eventually when you get it, don't forget it. But anyway, I'll bring you back another flute in just a second. Okay, and this is a 6-hole flute, and once again, one of my 6-hole flutes, and I say my 6-hole flutes, it's a pattern that I learned, actually one of the first ones I learned, that one of my cousins from Tennessee had learned from a book. And this book had been around since the 1800s. Inside of the book it had a illustration on how to make drums and how to tan skins with brain tanning techniques, and how to make a single flute in there. And the flute pattern that my cousin showed me was one that was very similar to this one. And the pattern, when you made the flute, depending on the diameter of the flute, how big it is in the inside, that would determine whether or not you needed to keep your finger on this hole all the time, or if you needed to keep it on this hole all the time. And I always wondered why it was that an Indian person who would spend so much time, it would take hours to drill a hole out in a flute like this, with the simple hand tools that people used back in the day. And why would a person drill a hole out and then keep it covered up at all times? It just seemed kind of strange to me. So I explored it a little further and found out, well, guess what? That hole actually had a purpose, but the size of the flute was what was determining the location of the hole, and the placement didn't coincide properly. So years and years down the road, here we go with a flute that plays and sounds like my 5-hole flute, and it actually gives you that top grace note right here instead of having to overblow and play an additional fingering to get it. So if you listen very carefully, see what you think. So it's just a simple minor pentatonic scale, just like all the other flutes, and you uncover your fingers one at a time, going from bottom to top. And when you get up to the top, you uncover that hole too. I mean, you don't have to keep your fingers on any of these holes to make it play properly. And that's the way it should be. I mean, obviously, once again, people who didn't have a whole lot of time to waste to drill a hole and then eventually not use it just didn't seem right. So that's what inspired me to start making these. This is the first one of those that I made. This one's made out of a piece of elderberry. Elderberry is something that in the South a lot of people cut and burn and throw away as weeds. In the North, I don't remember seeing a whole lot of them when we lived up north, but I know that there's a medicine that's made out of elderberry, and of course people always say, well, what about elderberry wine? There's probably something good you can do with that too, but the medicine that was made out of the elderberry, we actually take for colds and coughs and stuff like that if we ever get one, which is usually pretty rare. This flute, however, is one of my favorite flutes. It's the natural color of the elderberry. When it gets oiled, it turns kind of a bright yellow color, kind of a gold almost. And the inside of it was originally very hollow. All I had to do was push the core out. The core is a spongy type substance that's like the inside of a lot of weeds, or the inside of a corn stalk has a very similar spongy type substance. And I pushed it all the way out, in which case I wound up with a hollow tube and then put a block in here from our partition, just like it naturally occurs in the bamboo and the river canes. But this flute, like I say, is one of my favorites. It was one of my first ones, if not, I think the first one that I made of the true 6-hole pattern that was accurate and plays properly. And this 6-hole pattern echoes throughout many different indigenous customs and cultures, as well as the Anasazi flute. It's made from the same or very similar 6-hole pattern, and we'll get into that one later on down the road if it's something that we determine it needs to be discussed, or if anybody wants to request it, please feel free to. This flute, like I said, being a higher pitched flute, it is smaller in diameter, a little bit shorter than the long one we first showed you, and about the same length of the Cherokee flute, but once again still a little bit smaller in diameter due to the material constrictions and of course the restrictions of the type of flute pattern we were using and what we were wanting really to do with it. But I'm really pleased with it. I like it a lot, and it's very dear to me, one of my favorites. And right back with one more flute for you to see. Okay, and this is the last one of the flutes I was going to show you in this particular video series. This is a mini flute, we call it, or a Cherokee Little People flute. I don't know of its origins being related to Cherokee Little People, but I imagine if they played one, this would be about the right size. So it seems to fit Cherokee Little People flutes, what I've been calling it. It's also a 5-hole flute. I've made them in 6-hole patterns, but I do prefer the 5-hole flute in this one. The flute is very tiny in diameter, really about the size of a number 2 pencil. I don't know if you can see down inside of there, but it's not even big enough to stick my little finger in. It has a very high-pitched sound, but unlike a lot of higher-pitched whistles or things that you would expect not to play or to produce a really melodic sound or even an accompaniment, this one actually does produce a really beautiful tone and can be used to accompany other flutes and even played by itself, which I have in several of my albums. But it plays just like the others. You cover all the holes up and uncover them one at a time, and then all the way back down, and also has that top grace note, which is a octave range above this bottom note here. So anyway, just to let you see, it's also made out of a type of sawgrass that we use for a lot of flutes these days. It's nice, the links are still short, but it's still a wonderful flute and material for making flutes. So anyway, a very high-pitched flute. This one I believe is the A range above the A range Cherokee flute, so they do make a great accompaniment, and certainly having a Cherokee flute and a Cherokee Little People flute play together is really really kind of a magical existence. It's something really nice when you get the two of them playing together. They sound really amazing. But in either case, like I said, I hope you enjoyed this flute video on how to play the flute. Native American flutes that we brought out are all ones that either myself or one of my family have made. And of course, we do sell them on our website and of course on eBay, as many of you probably know. That's maybe how you found a lot of this. But in either case, if you are interested in a specific flute type, one that you may not see on my website or we haven't discussed, or if you want to have another video made on how to play a certain kind of flute or information about it, then please feel free to contact us either through, of course, our website or through YouTube or whatever is necessary. Just get a hold of us and let us know. And don't forget that, as always, there's a link at the bottom of the page here. We'll give you a link back to our webpage, and you can find more information about myself and my family and the crafts that we make. So once again, Charlie Mato-Toyela, and have a great day.